It's time to make it, just give it a try. 'Cause you can make it like the old fat guy.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show of You Can Make It. I'm David Farrell. I'm going to make something I think you're really going to enjoy today because most people love bacon and I'm going to make bacon. I'm going to be making Canadian bacon. Canadian bacon is what the Americans call it. Us here in Canada call it back bacon. I don't know why. You decide what you want to call it. I'm fine with either. Now to make back bacon or Canadian bacon, you need a piece of pork loin. And I have a piece of pork loin here, and you can get very lean ones or you can get fattier ones. You can trim it up as you like. Now I like a bit of fat in mine, so I actually got a piece called a sirloin, which has a little bit more fat on it, because I like some fat in my bacon when it cooks up. You can buy a really lean loin if you like, with just this part, and that would have you much less fat and maybe would be a bit healthier. It'll also have quite a thick fat cap up on here, and you can either trim it or leave some on as you like. That's totally up to you. So you can also make bacon out of pork shoulder, which is called buckboard bacon, or belly or side bacon, which is what you buy in the store in the strips. Today, back bacon. So we'll just set the meat aside, and we're going to make up a curing mix. And what a curing mix is a mixture of three things. It's brown sugar for sweetness, kosher salt to help draw the liquid out of the bacon, which gives us good consistency, and something called pink salt #1 or Prague powder #1 or Instacure #1. It's got a whole bunch of brand names. But the important thing to know is that it has to have 92.75% salt and 6.25% sodium nitrite. It must have that ratio or you can't use it in this recipe. I bought mine online, but you can find it at butcher supply stores or sausage supply stores. It is needed to make bacon. That's what gives it the pink color. The other reason you need it is because you're going to be smoking your bacon at low temperatures for a long period of time. And if you don't have nitrates in the bacon, there's a risk that bacteria will form and bring on food poisoning. So you must have enough nitrates to prevent that. They inhibit bacterial growth. But nitrates are bad for you if you have too much. So it's important you use the exact amounts in this recipe. If you double the recipe, you have to double the amounts of salts. If you use half the amount of meat, you have to use half the amount of salts. The measurements are critical. I even suggest you buy a small scale and use the grams measure, but you can do it with milliliters if you're very careful. So we'll get into making up our curing mixture that'll go on the pork, and we'll start off with the brown sugar. For each kilogram of pork, you need to use 40 milliliters of brown sugar. For each kilogram of pork, you need to use 15 milliliters of kosher salt. Now, after I trimmed that pork, I weighed it to be exactly 1 kilogram. So I have 40 milliliters of brown sugar and 15 milliliters of kosher salt. So we'll just put those in my bowl here. And then comes the pink salt #1 or Prague powder #1, whichever one you're getting. For each kilogram of pork, you need to use 3 grams or 2.2 milliliters of pink salt. So we'll put that in. Now, if you're used to working in pounds, that works out to 0.044 ounces of pink salt per pound of pork and 4 teaspoons of brown sugar per pound of pork and 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt per pound of pork. So if you had 4 pounds, you'd multiply each of those by 4. So we're just going to mix those ingredients together until they're really well combined. There we go. So now that they're well combined, I'm going to bring my piece of pork over, and you'll notice I've got it on a plate. The reason I have it on a plate is I'm going to rub that curing mixture onto the pork, and some of it's going to fall off. I want to catch any that falls off because it's important that it all goes on the pork later. So we'll just sprinkle some of the curing mixture over the top and rub it in. Get it on all the surfaces. There we go. Just flip it over and we'll put the last of it on the other side and rub it in. Now, one thing you do need to know is if you're making up more than one pieces of pork, do them one at a time and put each one in its own curing container, which I'll talk about in a minute. Do not put 2 or 3 together in one. It just doesn't work out well. So I've got all of my pork covered with the curing mixture. Now, this has to cure in this salt long enough for the ingredients to soak through into the pork. And what I did was, before I rubbed this in, whatever, I measured this pork and it's just over 2 inches thick. And how thick the pork is depends how long it'll take for it to soak in. Now, I like to give a good long curing period. So my rule is that I use 4 days for each inch of pork plus 2 days. So this is 2 inches thick, so 2 times 4 is 8 days, plus 2 is 10 days. So I'm going to cure this for 10 days. Now you have several choices. You can put this in a non-reactive container, a glass, plastic, ceramic, or stainless steel, and just put some saran wrap over it. Or you can put it in a Ziploc bag and seal it. Or you can put it in a vacuum sealed bag, seal both ends but don't suck the air out, and leave it in that for 10 days. The trick is that while it's sitting in whatever curing container you choose, is you have to roll it around, mix it, and rub the cure into the meat every day or two for the 10 days. So I'll just put this in a plastic bag and seal it. Now it's important your container doesn't leak, because any liquids that come out should be kept in contact with the meat. I'll see you in 10 days. Our bacon sat in a plastic bag with the curing rub all over it for the prescribed time. And you'll note there's a little bit of liquid in the bag. During the process, some liquid may draw out of the bag and a lot of it will draw back in. That's just normal. But if it's kind of dry and not a lot of liquid too, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. So what we want to do now with our bacon is take any surface salt off. Because we used a dry rub on the surface of the pork, it'll have quite a bit of salt on the surface, and we just want to get that off. So we're just going to open our plastic bag up, and we're going to take the bacon, and you'll feel it's a lot firmer now that it's cured, and we're going to put it in some cold water. And we're going to soak it in cold water for 1 hour. We're going to change the water once during that period of time, and then I'll come back and show you what you do next. The pork was soaked in cold water for an hour, and I changed the water at about the half-hour point, so it's well rinsed. Now I've just put it on a rack over a plate, and what I'm going to do is just pat the surface dry with paper towel. When you make bacon and you're going to smoke it, it's very important that the surface of the bacon is totally dry. It should even feel a little tacky. The term that's used is pellicle, and it just means a dry surface that'll take the smoke better. So by starting with patting it dry, it becomes a little dry to begin with. But you'll find that moisture will come out of it for a while. So to make sure it's totally dry, what I like to do is put it on a rack in the fridge, uncovered overnight, and then the surface will be really totally dry. So that's where this is going, is into my fridge, uncovered, to let it totally dry out. I'll see you tomorrow. Now I have a smoker, so it's easy for me to smoke my bacon, but if you don't have a smoker, can you still make bacon? Yes, you can. There's 2 methods you can use to make a bacon without a smoker. One is to use a smoke generator, and there's different kinds of smoke generators. There's ones like this that have a maze shape in them, and there's ones that are a hollow tube, like this. And you fill them with food-grade pellets. They're used for barbecuing, and smoking meats and that sort of thing, and you would fill them with it. With this one, you would fill the maize and light one end, and it would slowly work its way through. With this one, you light one end and it smokes down the tube. Then you can just put this in a barbecue, and don't turn any heat on the barbecue, but put this and the bacon in the barbecue, and you just want to light it up. And to light it up is quite simple. You just put the pellets in it and get a propane torch. And then you turn the propane torch onto the pellets until they get a good flame going. Now that I've got a good flame going, I'm going to let it just have the flame burn down and then hit it again. And let the flame burn down. And you want to let the flame burn down 3 times. And so here's my third hit. There we go. And we'll let that flame burn down, and then we're going to blow on the coals to make sure they're glowing really bright red, and then this will produce a nice amount of smoke for 3 to 4 hours. And you just put that in the barbecue, no heat on in the barbecue, with the bacon until such time as it goes out. Then what you do is you take that bacon and you put it in your oven and cook it between 180 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit until the internal temperature of the bacon is 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, what if you don't want to buy a smoke generator? You can still make bacon without smoking it. Many European countries make a cured bacon without smoking it. Just take the bacon and put it in your oven at between 180 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit and heat it until the internal temperature of the bacon is 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It will make a delicious bacon, a little more hammy than a smoked bacon, but very tasty. So my flame's just about burned down, and now I'm going to give it a blow. And I will show you now, you've got a lot of smoke coming off it right now, and that will die down a little bit as it runs. But there is a smoke generator, and you can make bacon without a smoker. So I'm just going to get my pork loin ready to put in the smoker, and I'll see you in a minute. I left the pork out in the fridge overnight to dry up. You can see it here. It's got a nice dry, tacky surface. And I've put it in my smoker with a temperature probe attached so I can keep track of the internal temperature. As long as I had my smoke generator set up to show you how to use it, I put it in to give some extra smoke to my smoker. Now, if you don't have a heat probe and a remote thermometer to keep track of it, let it smoke for 3 or 4 hours and then start checking it every 45 minutes or so with a little handheld thermometer that you can put in it and get an instant read on the temperature. And you're looking for a temperature between 130 and 140. It's not critical. This bacon does have to be cooked before you eat it. It's not safe to eat after 130 to 140. You do have to fry it up. So we're just going to close up my smoker, and we're going to let it bathe in the smoke until it gets to the internal temperature, 130 to 140, and then I'll talk to you then. I smoked the bacon until it had an internal temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit, and that took about 4 to 5 hours. And then I brought it inside, cooled it to room temperature, and just covered it and put it in the fridge overnight. So this is what came out. As you can see, it's a beautiful red color. The fat has a nice creamy texture. That's a nice piece of back bacon. And some people tell you need a slicer to make bacon. Not quite true. If you buy a decent slicing knife, nice sharp one with a straight edge like this, you can cut the bacon yourself. Now, I will warn you that these outside edges are pretty smoky, and you might want to save them for when you're making chili or something and want to add some extra flavors. But if you take your time and slice through those and then just keep slicing very carefully, you start to get some really nice pieces of bacon. You can see how wonderfully pink that is, just exactly the way you want it. And we'll just do another slice to show you it can be done by hand. But of course, it is easier with a rotary slicer, a mechanical slicer, which I'll set up and use to slice the rest of the bacon. So just give me a minute. I've set up my stand slicer, my rotary slicer, and now you have a decision to make. How thick do you like your bacon? The bacon they do in the store tends to be a little over 1/16 of an inch. I prefer to cut my home bacon at around 1/8 of an inch. I just think it gives it more chew. But you can actually cut it any thickness you like. So experiment and find out how thick you like your bacon. And now I'll just turn this on and start running some slices off it. And as you can see, that's a beautiful piece of bacon. I'm going to make it just a bit thinner. There we go. And just keep running. And see nice, beautiful slices of bacon. Now, I find that if you flip the bacon every 3 or 4 slices, you get evener slices. Just something I've learned with experience. So there we have some beautiful, beautiful sliced bacon. And as pretty as it looks, you can't just look at bacon to know how good it is. You've got to cook some. So give me a moment and we're going to fry some up. I have my frying pan preheated. And I'm just going to drop a couple of slices of bacon into the frying pan and we'll give it a cook up. Our bacon's almost cooked, and you'll notice when you cook homemade bacon, not as much liquid comes out of it. Most commercial bacon is made by injecting a brine into the pork, which adds a lot of water to the pork. And when you first put them in a frying pan, they tend to give that water off and steam a lot. Home-cooked bacon just starts sizzling and browning right away because it's got so much less water in it. And you can see the bacon gets a nice color. And that's about the way I like my bacon. You can cook it crispier if you'd like. It's all a matter of personal preference. But I'm pretty happy with this. So we'll just take her out, put her on our serving plate, and have a taste. There we go. So, let's try our bacon. Take a piece here. Oh. That is so much better than anything you'll buy in a store. It still has the salty taste of bacon, but it's a little less salt than you get in the commercial bacon. It has a wonderful sweetness from the brown sugar. It has a really good, nice, deep smokiness that just goes through the pork. This is an absolutely delicious bacon. And of course, the best thing is, you can make it.
I have a good woman. I ain't good looking, but I do some cooking. I'm the old fat guy. So use that oven if you want some lovin'. Be like the old fat guy. Be like the old fat guy.